Hey guys, welcome back to Turn Your Lights On. I'm your host Emily, and as always, I dive deep into true crime stories, peeling back every layer until we get as close to the truth as possible. My messages and comments are always open, so drop your thoughts, theories, or questions below. And if there's a case you want me to tackle next, let me know. But for now, let's go ahead and hop into this week's case. Today's case focuses on heavy topics like control, violence, grief, and manipulation. And I'm going to walk you through all the details and the timeline.
On February the 22nd, 1994, Emily came into the world. They gave her to me to hold, and I held her in my arm, and her head was in my palm, and her feet were in the kind of crook of my elbow. Emily opened her eyes slowly, and we just sat there staring at each other. I just felt this love that I'd never felt for anything before.
The chilling murder of Emily Longley took researchers, investigators, police, and her family members on a tailspin trying to find answers. Answers that would explain what happened to Emily the night she was murdered.
Man had been arrested and released on bail.
Very early on, we started to get a picture. This is quite a volatile relationship.
It's just not on me. It's just like, oh yeah, do you love me? Would you show it?
He wanted to know where she was all the time, what she wore, who she was going out with, and where she was going to be.
He just wanted to control her.
Do you have anything at all to say?
Taylor's mum and dad were going to do everything they could to support their son.
I started to appreciate that Mrs. Turner was not being truthful.
We had no information. There were no obvious internal or external injuries to Emily Longley.
There didn't seem to be an obvious reason why she died.
What we needed was a cause of death. We had to prove or disprove my theory that Emily had died at the hands of her boyfriend.
Emily Longley was born on February 22nd, 1994. She spent part of her youth in New Zealand, and in 2009, she made a bold decision to relocate from Auckland to the UK to pursue further education. Emily ended up in Bournemouth, which is located on England's south coast, where she stayed with her grandparents. While in Bournemouth, Emily quickly fell in love with a young man named Elliot Turner. According to all my resources, Emily and Elliot seemed to have a great relationship. The young couple were rather fond of each other very early on into this relationship. Emily was a very witty and outgoing young girl, while my sources claim Elliot to be a, quote, flash cash rich kid who modeled himself on being a gangster, end quote. But cracks began to show as early as just a few short months into their relationship. Elliot was quickly growing more controlling, jealous, and irritable with Emily. So already, before the night of the murder, we see a relationship with serious red flags: possessiveness, emotional volatility, threats, and manipulation. Elliot's irritability and need to control Emily didn't just stop at petty little disputes. He took his need for controlling her much too far. And on the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily had plans to go out with friends. In the lead up to that, tension in her relationship with Elliot had already been mounting. Elliot demanded to know what Emily's whereabouts would be for the night. Elliot demanded to know where she was going, who she was seeing, controlling who she spent time with, making remarks about her attire, and generally trying to monitor her movements. That night, Emily decided to still go out, but the precise timeline of when she returned, or what transpired between her return and the early hours of May 7th, isn't 100%. Authorities have put together a series of events to the best of their ability to create a timeline that they believe to be accurate to the events that occurred that night. And one of the biggest things to note is that after Emily's murder, Elliot admits that the two had a pretty intense fight. Elliot even told authorities that the fight between the couple had gone as far as becoming a physical dispute. In the early morning hours of May 7th, 2011, Emily was discovered dead in Elliot's bedroom. Elliot's mother, Anita Turner, was the one to make the 999, which is their emergency services number, call.
Just tell me what's happened there, the reason for the call.
My son's friend staying with us. This morning, I tried to wake both of them up, but the girl didn't wake up. We tried to wake her up. I don't know what it is.
Right, now, is she breathing?
No, I don't think she is.
I need you to pull back the duvet from it and just look to see if you can see any signs of breathing.
I tried to hold the pulse.
No, I need you to put your face next to her mouth. Can you feel any breath? Can you see her chest going up and down?
No.
Anything round her neck?
Anything around her neck? Oh, that necklace. Necklace to be. No, she's got a necklace very tight.
Very tight round her neck?
Yeah.
How tight?
Very, very tight. The ambulance is here.
Right, I need you to undo that necklace, and somebody needs to open the door. Your son, can you chat to your son? I need you to open the front door and get that necklace from around her neck off.
Okay.
Now, do it now.
She claimed she found Emily unresponsive, with her necklace tight around her neck. This detail, Emily's necklace, becomes one of the most important clues in this case. It's noteworthy that from the crime scene, photographs and forensic accounts stated that there was no sign of a struggle or injuries on Emily's body. No weapons were found, and Emily's body showed little trauma, just some minor marks at her neck, which could have been consistent with what Elliot's mom had told the police dispatcher over the phone, that Emily may have suffocated by her necklace in her sleep. When Elliot was called in and questioned by authorities, this is when he made his initial statement that he and Emily had had an altercation that night that had grown physical. He said that they had argued and that he made brief contact with her neck out of self-defense. He claimed that he didn't mean to hurt her, and Emily had seemed to be okay after the altercation, so he wasn't much concerned. So here's the dilemma. A clean crime scene, a body with almost no injuries, no visible weapon, and only subtle clues that lead to a domestic dispute that led to a possible murder, and a narrative from Elliot that frames whatever happened as unintended and self-defense. However, based on impressions alone, authorities were quickly suspicious of Elliot and his behavior. Because Emily's body did not show clear signs of trauma, her cause of death remained unascertained in initial pathology reports. The toxicology report came back clean. There were no obvious traces of drugs or poisons. The forensic pathologist could not definitively decide if strangulation, suffocation, or some other mechanism killed Emily. That lack of certainty was a major obstacle. Without concrete evidence to prove what the cause of Emily's death was, it was hard to pinpoint evidence against Elliot. Because the physical evidence was so limited, the investigation leaned heavily on reconstructing Emily and Elliot's relationship, identifying patterns of abuse, and gathering testimonies. Witnesses and friends of Emily testified to Elliot's controlling behaviors. Emily's friends made claims against Elliot, stating that he would demand access to her phone, check her whereabouts constantly, and even go as far as to show up places that he knew she would be when it was clear that his presence was unwanted. Oftentimes, he would even get angry with her interactions with other people, and he would constantly try to limit her freedom. There were two specific pieces of evidence against Elliot that I thought would be important to know at this time. The first being that Elliot was allegedly pretty close with a coworker, and this coworker had come forward stating that Elliot would practice chokeholds on him. I thought this was pretty strange because why would anyone need to practice a chokehold unless they were planning on actually choking someone? And the second piece of evidence that I wanted to share was that on May 6th, the night that Elliot and Emily had gone into their dispute outside the club, Emily was enjoying the night with her friends when Elliot had showed up on his own account with a hammer. At least one witness confirmed Elliot carrying a hammer to a nightclub, reportedly as a threat. Again, super odd. Who carries around a hammer at a club unless they're either a handyman or have intentions on using it to harm someone?
We received CCTV from the night of the 30th of Emily entering a bar and making contact with Elliot, and he clearly is dismissive of her, doesn't want to speak to her.
That then escalated into actually assaulting her in front of friends in public.
And Turner comes up and grabs her head and smashes it into the table.
We've heard accounts from witnesses and Emily herself regarding the violence, but this was the first footage of actual violence from Elliot towards Emily.
So the evidence that I just shared with you guys is actually from a documentary called Manhunt, which dives pretty deep into Emily's murder. But I just wanted to share that little clip from the documentary to show you guys that this wasn't the first time that Elliot had actually tried to harm Emily or did harm Emily. So his intent on bringing a hammer into the club shows that it wasn't just to scare her, or that his self-defense claim when he choked her wasn't actually the first physical altercation that the couple had. So the fact that he had actually met her at a club once before and had slammed her head into a table shows that his physical contact with her is a pattern and not just a one-time thing.
He armed himself with a hammer. His intention was to go over and assault her at the bar. CCTV shows Elliot entering a club with what appears to be a lump hammer down the front of his trousers.
With these two crucial pieces of evidence being brought to authorities, there is definitely evidence that if Elliot is the one responsible for Emily's death, that it was definitely premeditated. The fact that Elliot practiced chokeholds a day before the murder is very telling, and it suggests premeditation. This detail gives prosecutors a way to argue that even though the scene was clean, the act might have been planned. At this point in time, investigators have enough evidence to move forward in the case to try and prosecute Elliot. Investigators obtain authorization to bug the Turner household with microphones inside the home. And what they captured was truly chilling. Authorities were able to capture recorded conversations in which Elliot's father, Lee Turner, allegedly admits in reference to Elliot that, quote, he effing strangled her, end quote, referring to Emily. The recordings also revealed that Elliot, his mother, and father discussed how to respond to law enforcement, how to spin the narrative, and how to dispose or hide evidence or otherwise manipulate explanations. For instance, Senior Investigator Officer Conway referenced that Elliot and his parents engaged in fabrication, destruction, and concealment of evidence. When authorities had arrived at the scene of the crime on the day of Emily's death, they had taped off Elliot's room where Emily was found. However, the Turners were able to convince authorities to allow them to gather some belongings so that they could get their necessities to stay somewhere else during the investigation. It is at this time where a jacket goes missing from Elliot's bed, and through more recordings that were taken at the Turners' home during the time that their home was bugged, they discovered that Elliot's mother had taken the jacket because Elliot had written a letter confessing to the murder of his girlfriend, Emily Longley. Discovering all this information allows the prosecuting team to create a really strong defense against the Turner family. But authorities aren't done here. Investigators also searched for traces of contact, meaning that they were searching for anywhere that Emily had come in contact with. They reportedly found Emily's makeup traces or DNA on Elliot's shirt, which can be common in relationships. However, this makeup or DNA was in an oddly suspicious spot. It was in the crook of Elliot's shirt in the forearm area. This detail supports the possibility that Elliot had direct physical contact with Emily's face or neck at the moment of her death. The fact that the mother had called 999 rather than Elliot and admitted she found Emily is a contested point. Why would the mother discover it rather than the boyfriend whose bed it occurred in? Also, investigators considered the fact that Elliot would have had to wait for his mother to arrive before making the call, which gave a lot of time between realizing Emily had passed to the time that police were called. All these pieces allowed investigators to come to the conclusion that even though there is no definitive cause, the circumstantial and behavioral evidence would be woven into a narrative of homicide, not accident or self-defense like Elliot had originally claimed. Investigators were also able to hear Elliot's father admit to his son's crime and told his wife to stop covering for their son. This was another piece of evidence that was retrieved during the time that authorities had bugged the Turner house. And at this point, it's blatantly obvious. There's no denying that Elliot not only murdered Emily, but had been planning to do so. It wasn't just out of a fit of rage. It was deliberate and premeditated. With ample amounts of evidence via surveillance, witness testimony, forensic insights, and behavioral evidence, the Crown Prosecution Service pressed forward with charges. In his defense, Elliot maintained that Emily attacked him first, that he reacted defensively, that he only made contact with her neck to stop the assault, and that he had no intent to kill. He claimed they then went to sleep, and upon waking, he did realize that she was unresponsive. He made this argument to try and prove to the court that killing Emily wasn't his intent. The defense also attempted to emphasize the forensic uncertainty, no definitive cause of death, minimal visible injury, and emphasized that there was no weapon found. They argued that Emily possibly died of an unknown natural cause, or that the evidence was too equivocal to convict beyond reasonable doubt, or even that her necklace did in fact suffocate her in her sleep. It was also made known in my research that it was likely that Elliot's legal team tried to challenge the reliability of his confession letter, as well as the conversations that police were able to capture. However, the defense put up a great argument. They brought up key patterns by demonstrating how Elliot's jealousy, control, and threats established a clear motive. The fact he had been practicing chokeholds the day prior to Emily's death, the planning, and evidence of concealment all support that this was not a momentary act of self-defense, but in fact premeditated. The Turner family's discussion on hiding evidence, the destroyed confession letter, and attempts to mislead investigators, the presence of Emily's DNA or makeup on Elliot's clothing indicates that he had close physical contact with her, using expert testimony to show that a person can strangle another with sufficient force to cause death without leaving obvious external injuries. And lastly, the prosecution emphasizes inconsistencies in Elliot's account, the delay in calling 999, and the question of why the mother found Emily rather than him. At one point in the case, Emily's father had even gone as far as to question Elliot during his trial, saying that he didn't even seem sad that Emily was dead. And Elliot responded with a snippy remark stating that it had already been a year since Emily had passed. The court had made their decision. Elliot Turner was charged with the murder of Emily Longley, and as far as his parents, Lee and Anita Turner, they faced charges of perverting the course of justice and their alleged involvement in hiding, deleting, destroying, or manipulating evidence and colluding to mislead investigators. And as for his parents, Lee and Anita Turner faced charges of perverting the course of justice for their alleged involvement in hiding, deleting, destroying, or manipulating evidence and colluding to mislead investigators. According to the documentary Manhunt, Elliot ultimately received a 16-year sentence for the murder, and his parents served 27 months collectively for their roles in the perversion of justice. Emily's father has since become an advocate for women and domestic violence. He strives to keep Emily's story alive so that others can see the signs before it's too late. He works hard shedding light on what happened to his daughter and works even harder to ensure that this will not happen to another poor, unsuspecting girl. And that's the case of Emily Longley. It is truly heartbreaking what happened to Emily, and at such a young age. She was only 17 years old and Elliot was 20. It just puts into perspective how awful domestic violence can really be and just how quickly it can escalate. I truly feel for both Emily and her family. Domestic violence is no joke. And I urge anyone who's going through something similar to Emily to please seek help before it's too late. With that being said, I thank everyone who tuned into this week's case. I'm always curious to hear from you guys what cases you'd like me to research next. Thanks for diving deep into this dark story with me today. I will see you guys back with another episode, and as always, stay alert, stay empathetic, and always turn your lights on.